The execution bell tolled at dawn. It echoed across the stone towers of Valthera like a death sentence whispered by the gods themselves. Below the balcony of the high court, thousands gathered in silence. Warriors in iron armor, elders wrapped in silver-threaded cloaks, mothers clutching their children. And at the center of the great obsidian courtyard, a dragon knelt in chains. Its massive wings were pierced by iron hooks. Its midnight scales, once radiant as starlight, were dulled with dried blood. Smoke escaped from its nostrils in weak, trembling bursts. And standing before it was the Alpha King, King Kael Draven. His black ceremonial cloak moved in the wind like a living shadow. A golden crown rested upon his dark hair, but it seemed heavier today, almost unbearable. In his hand, he held the execution blade of Valthera. The same blade used to seal treaties. The same blade used to crown rulers. The same blade used to end monsters. The High Elder's voice rose above the courtyard. By decree of the council, the dragon Varanth is condemned. Its fire has scorched our lands. Its rage has cost innocent lives. The king must choose. A murmur rippled through the crowd.
Choose.
The word struck harder than steel. The elder turned toward Kael, his silver eyes cold. Your Majesty, to secure the loyalty of the realm and preserve your crown, you must execute the dragon. Refuse, and you will forfeit your throne.
Silence.
The kind that crushes lungs. The dragon lifted its head slowly. Its great golden eye locked onto Kael. There was no rage there, only pain. And something else.
Trust.
The chains tightened as guards pulled them forward. The execution platform waited. Kael's jaw clenched. This dragon had fought beside him in war. It had shielded him from a poisoned arrow. It had burned enemy armies to protect the kingdom. It had never turned against him. But 3 nights ago, something changed. Varanth had lashed out, burned the southern fields, scorched a village. The council claimed madness. The priests whispered of corruption. The people demanded blood. Choose, the elder repeated. Crown or dragon? Power or loyalty? King or exile? Kael stepped forward, and the dragon bowed its head. The execution blade trembled in his hand. Would you sacrifice the one who saved your life to keep everything you built? Or would you burn your kingdom down for loyalty? Tell me in the comments, what would you choose? Because what happened next, no one saw coming. Not the council, not the kingdom, not even the Alpha King himself. And it began with a single voice from the crowd. Stop. The words sliced through the silence sharper than any blade. Heads turned. Guards shifted. The council gasped. And from between armored soldiers stepped a young woman no one of status recognized. Her cloak was plain. Her boots worn. Ash clung to her sleeves as if she had walked through fire itself. But her eyes did not waver. She walked past the stunned guards, past the murmuring nobles, past the execution platform, and stood between the dragon and the blade. Gasps erupted. The guards reached for her, but she raised her chin. If you kill him, she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled, you doom the kingdom. The elder sneered. Remove this insolent girl. But the dragon moved. Its massive body shifted, placing itself slightly behind her, as if shielding her. The courtyard froze. Kael's eyes narrowed. He had never seen anyone stand before Varanth without trembling. And yet she did not move. She looked directly at him. Not at his crown. Not at his blade. At him. Your Majesty, she said softly. He is not mad. He is dying. A ripple of shock tore through the crowd. Dying? The dragon let out a low, pained rumble. And for the first time, since the execution bell rang, the Alpha King hesitated. The council began shouting. Lies. Witchcraft. Arrest her. But Kael did not look at them. He looked at the stranger standing before a chained dragon as if she feared neither fire nor death. Explain, he commanded. The single word carried thunder. The girl swallowed once. My name is Lyra Vale, she said. And if you give me one moment, I can prove it. And in that moment, Everything changed. Welcome back, lovelies. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because I will be giving you more stories just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The wind shifted. Ash carried across the courtyard like a memory that refused to settle. Lyra Vale stood beneath the towering shadow of the dragon, fully aware that one wrong breath could mean her execution before sunset. She had not planned for this moment. She had not rehearsed her words. But she had known, since the night the southern sky burned, that this day would come. And she had promised herself she would not stay silent again. Before the fire, 3 nights earlier, Lyra's world had been painfully ordinary. She lived beyond the eastern cliffs, in a forgotten village called Ember Hollow, a place so small it barely appeared on the kingdom's maps. Most there were farmers, miners, blacksmiths, people who kept their heads down and paid their taxes without complaint. Lyra worked as a healer's apprentice. Not a priestess, not a noble scholar, just a girl who knew herbs better than politics. Her hands were always stained green from crushed leaves. Her shelves filled with jars of ground root, dried petals, and powdered bone. She had grown up with one lesson carved into her heart. Fire does not destroy without reason.
Her father used to say that.
Before he died. Before the rumors began. Before dragons became monsters. He had been a dragon whisperer. One of the last. A rare soul who believed dragons were not beasts of chaos, but creatures bound to ancient magic older than thrones and crowns. He used to take Lyra to the cliffs at night. Listen, he would tell her as distant wings cut across the stars. They do not roar without cause. They burn when something inside them burns first. But when Lyra was 12, the council outlawed dragon whisperers. Called them dangerous. Traitors. Madmen who sympathized with creatures too powerful to control. Her father refused to bend. 3 days later, he was found dead in the forest. Wolf attack, they said. But wolves did not leave blade wounds. Lyra never forgot. And she never forgave. The night Varenth burned. When the southern fields caught fire, Lyra was the first to arrive. She saw the smoke before the soldiers did. She smelled it before the bells rang. Villagers screamed as golden flames tore through crops. Homes collapsed into embers. Livestock scattered. And, above it all, a dragon, Varenth. His wings beat violently, not in rage but in agony. Lyra saw something no one else noticed. He wasn't attacking randomly. He was circling, flying erratically, like something inside him hurt. When he finally collapsed beyond the hills, she ran toward the smoke instead of away from it. She found him there, half hidden behind scorched stone, his breathing uneven, one massive wing twitching, and beneath the shimmer of blackened scales, a wound, not from battle, not from arrows, a puncture,
Deep.
jagged,
Poisoned.
Lyra's stomach twisted. No dragon could pierce its own scales like that. Someone had done this. She stepped closer. The dragon's eyes snapped open.
Gold.
Blazing. Terrified. She should have died that night. But instead of lunging, Varenth stilled, as if recognizing something. Lyra raised her shaking hand slowly. "I'm not here to harm you," she whispered. Her father's old pendant rested against her chest, a small carved thong of dragon bone. The dragon's breath warmed her skin. And, for the first time in her life, Lyra placed her palm against a dragon's scales. Heat flooded her.
Pain. Fear.
Poison spreading through ancient blood. She understood instantly. The dragon was not mad. He was infected. And dragons in agony burn everything around them. She worked through the night, grinding frostroot, crushing silverleaf, mixing antidotes her father once taught her. But dragon venom was no ordinary toxin. By sunrise, soldiers found them, and instead of thanking her, they chained the dragon and dragged her away. Back in the courtyard, Lyra's wrists still bore bruises from iron shackles. They had accused her of aiding a monster, called her reckless, insane. But the council cared less about truth and more about order. Fear spreads faster than fire. The people needed a villain. And Varanth was perfect. The dragon had always belonged to the Alpha King, bound to him by ancient ritual, a symbol of strength, of dominance, of divine right. But now the people whispered, if the dragon is corrupted, what does that say about the king? The council saw opportunity. Remove the dragon, weaken the king, tighten their own control. And so they called for execution. The Alpha King, Khal Draven, had ruled for 7 years. He was not cruel, but he was feared. His victories in war were legend. His bond with Varanth sacred. He had claimed the dragon at 19, a ritual that had nearly killed him. The bond carved through flesh and soul. Since then, they were more than allies. They were reflections. If the dragon suffered, Khal felt it. The past 3 nights, he had barely slept. He felt the dragon's pain like phantom fire under his skin. But when the fields burned, when children died, he could not ignore it. The council cornered him. Your Majesty, they said, the kingdom cannot survive if your dragon becomes a threat. They framed it as duty, as sacrifice, as leadership. But beneath their words was something darker. Control. And now, he stood before execution. Blade in hand. King or exile. Dragon or crown. And then, Lyra. Back to the moment. The courtyard vibrated with tension. Lyra stood between blade and beast. Khal studied her. She was not noble, not priestess, not warrior, just a village girl with fire in her eyes. You claim he is dying, Khal said, voice steady. Yes. And you can save him? If you let me. The elder scoffed. This is absurd. She is a common healer. Dragons are not cured with herbs and hope. Lyra's gaze sharpened. No, she replied. They are cured with truth. A murmur rippled. Kale's fingers tightened around the blade. What truth? Lyra swallowed. And this was the moment that could end her life. He was poisoned. Silence fell like a falling star.
Poisoned?
The dragon shifted weakly. The council erupted. Treason. Blasphemy. She seeks to turn us against ourselves. But Khal did not shout. He stepped closer. You are accusing someone of attacking my dragon. Yes. Do you have proof? Lyra hesitated. Because proof was still buried inside scales and blood. I need one moment, she whispered. Unchain him.
Gasps.
Unchain a condemned dragon? Madness. But Khal did not look away from her. And something inside him, the same instinct that bonded him to fire, told him she was not lying. If you were him, would you risk it? Would you unchain a dragon in front of your entire kingdom for the word of a stranger? Or would you strike the blade and end it? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Because the next decision the Alpha King made would either save his throne or burn it to ash. The courtyard felt like it was holding its breath. Khal Draven had faced armies without flinching. He had stood in rivers of blood and never hesitated. But this was different. Before him stood a chained dragon. Behind him, a kingdom watching. And, between them, a girl who had just accused someone of treason. Unchain him, Khal ordered. The words struck the stone like thunder. The High Elder stepped forward immediately. Your Majesty, this is reckless. Unchain him, Khal repeated.
His voice was colder this time.
2 guards hesitated, then obeyed. Iron hooks were pulled free. Chains fell, clanging against the stone. The dragon shifted weakly, but did not rise. His wings remained folded, body trembling. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Lyra exhaled slowly. Now came the part she could not afford to fail. She stepped closer to Varanth. Kale's hand remained on the hilt of the execution blade. If he lunges, he said quietly, I will strike. He won't, Lyra answered. She placed her hand against the dragon's neck again. Heat surged beneath her palm, but now she searched deeper. Her father had taught her something most healers never learned.
Poison speaks.
It leaves patterns. Dragon venom corruption glows faintly under the scales, a sickness that spreads in jagged veins. She leaned closer. Her fingers traced along the puncture wound she had seen beyond the hills.
There.
Still raw. Still oozing blackened residue. She turned slightly toward the king. Look. Kale stepped forward cautiously. He crouched near the dragon's side. And for the first time, the crowd saw it. A wound no blade from the village could have made. The puncture was narrow. Too precise. Too deliberate. This was no wild accident. This was done with forged steel, Lyra said softly. A dragon-piercing weapon. The High Elder's voice rose sharply. That is impossible. Only the royal armory carries such.
He stopped.
Too late. Every eye turned toward him. Kale's gaze hardened. Finish your sentence, he commanded. The elder paled slightly. Only select weapons can pierce dragon scales. Relics. Secured within the armory vault. And who has access to that vault?
Kale asked.
Silence. Because everyone knew. The council. The royal guard captains. And the king himself. Lyra stepped back. The poison is spreading inward, she continued. When it reaches his heart, he will lose control entirely. His fire will burn without direction. He did not mean to scorch the southern fields. He was already dying. Murmurs turned into uneasy whispers. Someone had attacked the Alpha King's dragon. Someone powerful. Someone close. The dragon let out a low groan, smoke spilling weakly from his mouth.
Kale felt it then.
The familiar sting beneath his ribs.
The bond.
It flared painfully. Lyra looked at him sharply. You feel it, don't you? He did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. She stepped closer again, lowering her voice. If he dies from poison, the bond may take you with him. The words were barely audible, but Kale stiffened. Only dragon whisperers knew that. Only those trained in ancient rites understood that the dragon bond was not symbolic. It was biological, magical, intertwined. If Varantha's heart stopped violently, Kale's could shatter with it. The High Elder's voice cut through. This is manipulation. She seeks to weaken the crown by planting doubt. Lyra stood, her chin lifted. If I wanted to weaken the crown, I would have stayed silent. Kale rose slowly. His eyes scanned the council. For years, he had trusted them. But something shifted inside him now. A memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago. A private meeting. The elder urging him to reduce dragon patrols. To rely more on council-controlled guard forces. To modernize the kingdom's power structure. And when Kale refused, the elder had smiled too tightly. If Varanth falls, the elder had said then, the kingdom must adapt. The words returned like a warning bell. Your Majesty, one of the counselors protested. No one leaves. Guards rushed to close the iron gates. Tension snapped like a drawn bowstring. Kale turned toward Lyra. If you are right, he said quietly, you have just accused members of my council of treason. Yes. And if you are wrong, I will accept whatever punishment you choose. Her voice did not waver. The dragon shifted behind her again. Protective. The courtyard felt smaller. Dangerous. Because this was no longer about a dragon. It was about power. The elder raised his staff. This is madness. The girl has bewitched the king. Seize her. Several guards hesitated. Kale's voice roared across the stone. Touch her, and you answer to me. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. For the first time in years, the Alpha King stood not with his council, but against them. Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. This was bigger than she imagined. If she failed now,
she would not just die.
She would plunge the kingdom into chaos. Kale stepped closer to her. What do you need? He asked quietly.
Time.
Supplies. Privacy.
Trust. But she knew she would not get all of that.
I need access to the royal infirmary, she said. And I need the vault inspected immediately. The elder's face drained of color. The vault cannot be opened without unanimous council consent. Kale's gaze sharpened like steel. Then perhaps it is time I remind you who wears the crown. The courtyard erupted in stunned whispers. Because the Alpha King had just drawn a line. And lines in Valthera were written in blood. Varenth suddenly convulsed. A violent tremor shook his body. Smoke burst from his jaws. The ground beneath him cracked slightly from sudden heat. Lyra dropped to her knees beside him. "It's spreading faster," she breathed. Kale felt a searing pain beneath his ribs. He staggered slightly. No one else noticed. Except Lyra. "You're connected," she whispered. He met her eyes. And in that single glance, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. But recognition. Two people standing at the edge of something irreversible. If Varenth died, the king might fall. If the king fell, the throne would fracture. And if the throne fractured, war would come. Kale straightened. "Prepare the dragon for transport to the infirmary," he commanded. The elder shouted, "You cannot override the council." "I just did."
Gasps.
Because this was no longer execution day. It was rebellion day. Against his own advisors. Against the carefully controlled order. Against whatever shadow had dared to poison his dragon. Lyra looked up at him. "You just made powerful enemies," she said softly. Kale's jaw tightened. "They made themselves enemies the moment they touched what was mine." The words hung heavy in the air.
Meaning.
Was he speaking of the dragon? Or something else? The gates slammed shut. The dragon groaned again. And as guards carefully moved to assist in transporting Varenth, a hooded figure slipped through the edge of the crowd unnoticed. Watching. Waiting. Because the poison was only the beginning. And the choice between dragon and crown had just transformed into something far more dangerous. The dragon bled fire onto marble floors. Not flames of destruction, but heat that cracked stone and turned air heavy with metallic ash. The royal infirmary had never held something like Varenth before. It had been built for wounded soldiers, fevered nobles, injured children, not ancient creatures of fire and legend. Now its vaulted ceilings trembled with each ragged breath he took. Inside the infirmary, Kale dismissed nearly everyone. Only 3 royal physicians remained. Lyra, and 2 guards at the door. The High Elder had demanded to stay. Kale denied him. That alone sent whispers rippling through the palace halls. The dragon lay curled across reinforced stone, chains replaced with runic stabilizers etched into the floor. His golden eye fluttered weakly. Lyra knelt beside him immediately, sleeves rolled back, hands already moving. "Bring me crushed frostroot," she ordered without looking up. "Silverleaf paste. And boiling water." The physicians stared at her. Kale's voice cut through. "Do as she says." They obeyed. Lyra pressed her palm against the wound again. This time, the poison was easier to see. Dark veins spreading like roots beneath obsidian scales. But something was wrong. Poison spreads outward. This pulsed, as if reacting to something else. Her heart tightened. "This isn't ordinary venom," she murmured. Kale crouched beside her. "Explain." "It's feeding on the bond." His eyes narrowed. "The connection between you and Varenth is amplifying it." She looked at him carefully. "Which means whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." Silence. Because that was no longer sabotage. That was assassination. A kingdom on edge. Outside, the city churned with rumor. The king defied the council. The dragon still lived. A village girl now walked palace corridors under royal protection. Some called her savior. Others whispered witch. But the most dangerous reaction was fear. Fear fractures loyalty. And loyalty is the spine of a kingdom. Meanwhile, Kale had ordered Captain Ronan Vale to inspect the armory vault. Ronan was one of the few men Kale trusted fully. A soldier who had bled beside him long before the crown. Inside the vault, rows of relic weapons lined the walls. Spears forged with dragon-own cores. Blades tempered in fire-resistant steel. And there, one slot empty. A dragon dagger.
Gone.
Ronan's jaw tightened. He locked the vault and headed straight for the infirmary. Back with Lyra. Lyra worked steadily, grinding herbs, mixing antidotes, carving a small incision around the puncture to draw poison outward. The dragon's muscles tensed, but did not strike. He trusted her. That alone unsettled Kale. How do you know this much? He asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed a paste into the wound. Steam hissed. Varenth growled weakly. My father studied dragons, she said finally. Studied? Kale asked. He believed they were guardians, not weapons. Kale's gaze hardened slightly. Dragons are both. Only when humans make them so. Their eyes met again. Not hostile, but sharp. Measured. There was pain in her voice when she spoke of her father. Unfinished grief. The kind that shapes a person. Before Kale could ask more, the infirmary doors burst open. Ronan entered, armor dusted with vault stone. My king, he said quietly. The dragon-piercing lance is missing. The room stilled. Kale stood slowly. Who has access? Council members. Senior guard captains. And Ronan hesitated. And me, Kale finished. Lyra exhaled slowly. It wasn't you. Ronan glanced sharply at her. You sound certain. I am. Kale studied her. Why? She hesitated. Because the truth was dangerous. Because the dragon would not have let you near him with that weapon. Silence. Even Ronan did not argue. The bond between king and dragon was sacred. Varenth would have sensed betrayal instantly, which meant the attacker had struck when the dragon was alone, or unconscious, or rest. 3 nights ago, Kale muttered, during the southern patrol. He had left Varenth resting beyond the cliffs for less than an hour. Less than an hour. That was all it took. Lyra's mind raced. The poison wasn't meant to kill quickly. It was meant to destabilize. Make the dragon appear mad. Force the council's hand. Force the king to choose. The trap had been political, precise, and patient. Someone wanted this execution, she whispered. Ronan nodded grimly. And they expected you to comply. Kale's jaw tightened. They underestimated me. Lyra met his gaze again. No, she said softly. They underestimated the dragon. The first clue. Lyra returned to the wound. She leaned closer. Closer than she had before. Her fingers brushed along the edge of the puncture. And then she felt it. A residue. Not poison. Oil. Scented faintly. Spice cedar. Her breath caught. I know that scent. Kale looked down sharply. From where? The council chamber. Silence dropped like a blade. The High Elder always burned spice cedar incense during meetings. Claimed it sharpened the mind. It was subtle, but impossible to mistake once known. Ronan's hand went to his sword. That is accusation without proof. Lyra swallowed. I'm not accusing. I'm observing. Kale stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Because if this was true, then this wasn't merely betrayal. It was treason at the highest level. And yet, Kale hesitated. The High Elder had served his father, had advised him for years. Could he truly orchestrate such a thing? Or was someone framing him? The deeper they dug, the murkier it became. The bond weakens. Suddenly Varenth convulsed violently. Heat blasted outward. A fissure cracked through the infirmary floor. Lyra was thrown backward. Kale staggered. Pain shot through his chest. He dropped to one knee. Ronan rushed forward. My king. Lyra scrambled back to the dragon. The black veins beneath the scales pulsed brighter now. Faster. It's accelerating, she whispered. The bond is feeding it. Kale gritted his teeth. Then sever it. The words stunned the room. Sever the dragon bond? That ritual was forbidden. It could kill both parties. Lyra shook her head. If we sever it while the poison is active, it could consume him instantly. And if we don't, Kale demanded through clenched breath, it may consume you both. Silence. This was no longer political intrigue. This was survival. And time was running thin. Lyra stared at the spreading veins. Something didn't fit. The poison wasn't just spreading through blood. It was moving along specific paths. Like it was guided. She pressed her hand against Kale's chest suddenly. He froze. What are you doing? Be still. She closed her eyes. And for a brief second, she felt it. The bond. Not visually, but emotionally.
Heat.
Power. Shared heartbeat. And beneath it, something unnatural. A second pulse.
Faint.
Like a whisper beneath fire. Her eyes snapped open. This wasn't meant just to kill the dragon. Kale's voice was low. Then what? It was meant to awaken something. The dragon groaned deeply. And, for a split second, his golden eye flickered. Not with pain, but with something darker. Something ancient. Lyra's blood ran cold. Whatever they injected into him, it's not just poison. Kale stood despite the pain. Speak plainly. It's binding magic. The word hung heavy. Binding magic was forbidden.
Old. Wild.
Used in ancient wars to control dragons like puppets. If activated fully, Varanth could become a weapon. Not of his own will, but controlled, directed, turned against his king, against the kingdom. And if that happened, the council would have justification to dethrone Kale. The plan unfolded in terrifying clarity. Lyra looked at him. They don't just want your dragon dead. Kale's voice darkened. They want me powerless. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, the hooded figure watched smoke curl from the infirmary tower, waiting, because the final phase of the plan had not yet begun. And the moment it did, the Alpha King would not be forced to choose between dragon and crown. He would be forced to choose between his dragon and her. The air inside the infirmary turned suffocating. Binding magic. The words would have once sounded like myth, like stories whispered in forbidden archives. But Lyra felt it now beneath her skin, like a second heartbeat inside the dragon, like something waiting to awaken. Kale stood over Varanth, breath uneven, jaw locked in controlled fury. If someone intends to control him, Kale said slowly, then they would need proximity. Lyra nodded. Or a trigger. Ronan stepped closer. A trigger? Yes, Lyra replied. Binding magic is dormant until activated. A phrase. A relic. A sigil. Something that completes it. Silence. Kale's eyes darkened. And if activated, Lyra didn't soften the truth. He would no longer be yours. The words struck harder than any blade. Varanth let out a low rumble, as if sensing the shift in tone. Kale pressed a hand briefly to the dragon's neck. A grounding touch. But his gaze had gone distant. Calculating. Because now the pieces rearranged themselves. The council pushes for execution. The dragon appears mad. The king forced to choose. If he kills Varanth, he loses his greatest power. If he refuses, the dragon eventually loses control and destroys the city. Either outcome weakens him. Either outcome fractures the throne. A perfect trap. Unless it wasn't finished. A sudden tremor shook the infirmary. Not from the dragon. From beneath the stone. Lyra stiffened. That's not him. Ronan reached for his sword. A pulse rippled through the floor. Then another. Varanth's body arched violently. Black veins flared like lightning beneath his scales. His golden eye snapped open and shifted. The pupil narrowed unnaturally. Smoke poured from his jaws. But not randomly. It formed, swirled, gathered toward the ceiling like summoned force. Lyra's blood turned cold. It's being activated. Kale staggered as pain lanced through his chest. He dropped to one knee again. Outside, shouts erupted. Guards. Screams. Chaos. The infirmary doors burst open. A soldier rushed in, pale. My king, the council chamber. What about it? Ronan barked. They're chanting. Silence slammed into the room. Lyra's mind snapped into clarity. They're completing the binding. Kale forced himself upright. They wouldn't dare. They already have, Lyra replied. Another violent pulse tore through Varanth's body. He rose halfway, massive wings spreading instinctively. Runic stabilizers on the floor cracked. The dragon roared. But the sound was wrong. Not agony.
Command.
The windows shattered outward. The sky darkened unnaturally. And then, Lyra saw it. A glowing sigil forming beneath Varanth's chest. Carved into the stone floor. It hadn't been there before. Someone had prepared this room. Her heart dropped. This wasn't spontaneous, she whispered. They knew you'd bring him here. Kale's gaze sharpened. This was arranged. Ronan swore under his breath. Then this entire rescue was part of their design. Lyra shook her head violently.
No. They didn't expect me.
The dragon's head snapped toward Kale. For a split second, recognition flickered. Then darkness swallowed it. He reared back. Fire ignited in his throat. Directed. Focused. At Kale. Lyra screamed. Move. Kale barely rolled aside as a torrent of flame blasted past him, carving molten lines into the wall. The dragon wasn't attacking wildly. He was targeting the king. Because if the bondholder dies, the throne collapses. The council steps in. The realm stabilizes. Lyra scrambled to her feet. Ronan, get him out of here. I'm not leaving him, Kale growled. You won't survive if you stay. Another pulse. The sigil beneath Varenth glowed brighter. Lyra's eyes darted across the room. She saw it now. Small iron shards embedded into the floor around the dragon. Inscribed. Hidden beneath stone panels. They'd built the trigger circle here. The council hadn't just poisoned the dragon. They'd anticipated the king's defiance. And weaponized it. The betrayal revealed. The infirmary doors opened again. But this time, the High Elder entered.
Calm. Composed.
Unharmed. While the city outside began to panic. His silver robes flowed untouched by chaos. I warned you, Your Majesty, he said softly. Emotion clouds judgment. Kale's voice became ice. You orchestrated this. The elder tilted his head. I preserved the kingdom. Varenth roared again, wings striking the ceiling beams. Preserved it? Kale spat. By turning my dragon against me? The dragon is a relic of old power, the elder replied smoothly. A symbol of volatile rule. The council believes the kingdom must move forward. With you at its head? Ronan growled. The elder smiled faintly. With stability. Lyra's pulse hammered. You used forbidden magic, she said sharply. For a greater good, the elder replied. You're killing him. The elder's gaze flicked to her. On the contrary, I'm repurposing him. Kale stepped forward despite the pain. You think you can control a dragon? I think, the elder said calmly, that once he slays you publicly, the realm will demand reform. Silence fell like death. You're willing to let him kill me, Kale said quietly. The elder's eyes hardened. A necessary sacrifice. And there it was. Not political maneuvering. Not protective governance. Ambition.
Cold.
Calculated. Patient. The dragon roared again. Fire surged upward. Lyra's mind raced. Binding magic required focus.
What?
Someone channeling it. She scanned the elder's staff. Its head glowed faintly, in sync with the sigil. You're the conduit, she breathed. The elder smiled slightly. Very perceptive. He raised the staff. The sigil flared blindingly bright. Varenth lunged. Not at Kale this time. At Lyra. Because she had interfered. Because she threatened the control. Time slowed. She did not run. She stepped forward. Straight toward him. Kale shouted her name. But she did something no one expected. She grabbed the elder's staff. The contact burned her skin instantly. Power surged violently through her body.
Fire.
Ancient.
Wild.
The elder's eyes widened. You cannot channel that. Lyra screamed as heat tore through her veins. But beneath the pain, she felt something awaken. Not fear. Recognition. The dragon's gaze locked onto hers mid-lunge. And in that moment, the binding magic faltered. Just slightly. Enough for Varenth to hesitate. Enough for Kale to step between them. Enough. Kale roared. The bond flared violently. The elder staggered. Lyra held the staff tighter. Burning. 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 And then, it cracked. A fracture split through the staff's core crystal. The sigil beneath the dragon flickered. The control snapped partially. Varenth collapsed heavily, roaring in confusion rather than obedience. The elder stumbled backward. You fool, he hissed at Lyra. You have no idea what you've awakened. She dropped the broken staff, hands blistered, breathing hard. But the dragon's eye, golden again, not fully free, but not enslaved. Kale turned slowly toward the elder. The room trembled with fury. You tried to murder your king. The elder straightened despite the chaos. For the future. Ronan stepped forward, blade drawn. For treason. Guards flooded the room at last, this time loyal to Kale. The elder did not resist as they seized him. He only looked at Lyra and smiled. You think this ends here? He whispered. The magic is already inside him. Lyra's blood ran cold. Because he was right. The binding circle had cracked, but not vanished. The poison still spread. The dragon still trembled. And Kale's hand pressed again to his chest. The bond was unstable. The elder was dragged away. The infirmary settled into shattered silence. Kale looked at Lyra. You risked your life. You would have done the same, she replied softly. He held her gaze longer this time. Something unspoken deepened there. Trust forged in fire. But the worst truth remained. Lyra looked down at the dragon. The magic isn't fully broken, she said quietly. Kale's voice was steady. Then we break it completely. She swallowed. There is only one way to sever binding magic that strong. He didn't look away. Tell me. Lyra hesitated. Because this was the moment everything would change. It requires merging the bond. Silence. Kale's brow furrowed. Merging? Yes. She met his eyes fully. The magic is trying to control him through you. And the only way to overpower it is if the bond isn't just yours anymore. The implications settled slowly. Heavy. Dangerous. You're saying, Kale said quietly, that to save him, you would have to share the dragon with me. The words hung between them like fate. And nothing in Valthera would ever be the same again. The infirmary smelled of smoke and shattered magic. Fragments of the elder's broken staff lay scattered across the stone floor like bones of a failed prophecy. Outside, the city trembled with rumor. Inside, silence pressed down like a storm waiting to break. Kale Draven stood beside his dragon. Beside Lyra. Between a crown and a catastrophe. You're asking me to share the bond, he said quietly. Lyra's blistered hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. I'm asking you to survive. Varantha's massive body shifted again. The black veins beneath his scales pulsed faintly, less violent now, but still there, waiting. The partial break of the staff had disrupted the control, but the magic remained inside him. Inside both of them. Kale felt it clearly now. Something invasive brushing against the edges of his mind. Testing. Searching. If activated again, it would not hesitate. You understand what you're suggesting? Kale asked. Yes. A dual bond has not been performed in centuries. Yes. It could kill you. She met his gaze steadily. I know. The room fell silent. Ronan finally spoke. My king, this is madness. We have arrested the elder. The council will fracture without him. We can regroup, isolate the magic, consult the archives. There is no time, Lyra interrupted. She knelt beside Varanth again. Her fingers pressed lightly to his scales. The warmth beneath her palm flickered, unstable. Binding magic grows stronger the longer it lives inside its host. It will root itself deeper. The next activation may not require a conduit. Kale exhaled slowly. If the magic consumes him, it may consume you. The words were no longer hypothetical. Kale straightened. Leave us. Ronan hesitated. My king. That was an order. The captain bowed reluctantly and exited, sealing the doors behind him. Now it was just the three of them. King. Dragon. Girl. Lyra looked at Kale. Why did you hesitate in the courtyard? She asked suddenly. He seemed almost surprised by the question. When they ordered his execution. Silence lingered. Because he has never failed me, Kale said quietly. And because I have never failed him. There was something raw in that admission. Unshielded. Lyra studied him carefully. You would have done it, she said softly, if you believed he was truly mad. Yes. And it would have broken you. Cale didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth lay heavy between them. Lyra's voice lowered. My father believed dragons mirror their bond. Cale's eyes flickered toward her. Meaning? If the dragon burns, something inside the bondholder is burning first. Cale stiffened slightly. She noticed. What are you carrying? She asked gently. He turned away. I carry a kingdom. That's not what I meant. Silence.
Long.
Then, when I was 19, Cale said quietly, the ritual nearly killed me. Varenth rejected 3 others before me. 2 died. 1 went mad. Lyra listened. The priest told me that if I doubted myself, even for a second, the dragon would tear me apart. And did you doubt? She asked. Cale's jaw tightened. Every second. Varenth let out a low rumble, as if remembering. But I refused to show it. Lyra nodded slowly. And now? He met her eyes. Now I don't know who I can trust. The weight of that confession shifted something between them. Not attraction. Not yet. But vulnerability. And vulnerability binds faster than ritual. Varenth convulsed suddenly. The faint black veins flared violently again. Cale gasped, clutching his chest. The bond pulsed painfully. Lyra grabbed his arm. It's reacting. To what? He demanded through clenched teeth. She closed her eyes briefly. Felt the rhythm. The pulse wasn't random. It was synchronized. With something beyond the room. The broken staff pieces. Even shattered, they hummed faintly. Residual magic. She inhaled sharply. It's tethered to something else. Cale's voice dropped. The Elder. Yes. The conduit had cracked, but not severed. As long as the Elder lived, the binding magic remained anchored. Cale's expression hardened. You're suggesting. I'm suggesting the magic must be destroyed at its source. The implication settled heavily. Execution. Not for justice. For survival. Cale walked toward the window, staring out at the restless city. If he executed the Elder publicly, the council would splinter. Supporters would revolt. Civil war would whisper at the gates. If he didn't, the dragon might fall. Or worse, be controlled again. The impossible choice returned. Dragon or crown. But now it was deeper. Mercy or power. Lyra stepped closer to him. If you hesitate again, she said softly, you may lose both. He turned toward her sharply. And what would you have me do? She swallowed. Do what a king must. Silence thickened. Because this was no longer about saving a dragon. It was about whether Cale would rule with fear. Or with courage. Varenth groaned again, weaker this time. Lyra dropped back to her knees beside him. She felt it clearly now. The dragon's strength fading. The poison still spreading. Even without full control. The magic was eating him alive. Tears burned her eyes unexpectedly. She hadn't meant to care this much. But she did. She pressed her forehead lightly against the dragon's scales. You're not a weapon, she whispered. You're not their pawn. Cale watched her. Something inside him shifted again. He had never seen someone treat Varenth like this. Not as symbol. Not as power. But as being. The dragon's golden eye opened slowly. It focused on Lyra.
Softened.
Cale felt that shift through the bond. And for the first time, jealousy flickered. Not of her, but of the connection forming. He stepped closer. If we attempt the dual bond, he said quietly, and it fails. It could kill me, she finished, and destabilize the magic further. Yes. And if it succeeds? Lyra looked up at him. Then the binding magic will be forced to split. And it cannot control 2 minds equally. Cale absorbed that. The risk was catastrophic. But so was inaction. Varenth's breathing grew shallower. The black veins pulsed slower now, but darker. Lyra felt dread sink into her bones. We're running out of time, she whispered. Cale's decision had to come now. Either attempt the forbidden ritual, or march down to the dungeon and execute the Elder. Both choices carried blood. Both choices would change the kingdom forever. He stepped toward her, kneeling beside her for the first time, their shoulders nearly touching. "What happens during the ritual?" he asked. She hesitated. "Pain. That I expected. Memories. Shared. Unfiltered." His eyes narrowed slightly, and she swallowed. "You cannot hide from each other once it begins." Silence fell, because kings survive by hiding weakness, and Lyra survived by burying grief. A shared bond would tear all of that open. Varenth let out a faint, fading growl. Lyra felt it then. The truth she didn't want to say. "If we don't choose now," she whispered, "he will choose for us." The dragon's golden eye dimmed slightly. Kale felt it in his chest. The fading, the slipping. For the first time, fear gripped him fully. Not of losing his throne, not of rebellion, but of losing him, and perhaps, of losing her too. Kale rose slowly, resolve hardening like forged steel. "Prepare for the ritual," he said. Lyra looked up sharply. "You're sure?" He met her eyes.
No.
But he stepped closer anyway. And somewhere beneath the palace, the High Elder smiled in his cell, because he had prepared for this possibility too. And the darkest part of the plan had not yet revealed itself. The ritual chamber had not been opened in decades. It lay beneath the palace, carved directly into the bedrock of Althera. Older than the throne room, older than the council, older even than the crown Kale wore. This was where dragons were first bound to kings, where fire met flesh, where power was not granted, but survived. The torches along the circular walls ignited as Kale and Lyra entered. Varenth was carried down slowly by reinforced platforms and chains enchanted for support, not restraint. He no longer fought. That frightened Lyra more than the roaring ever had. The black veins beneath his scales pulsed faintly now, like dying embers. Waiting, Kale removed his crown before stepping fully into the chamber. He set it on the outer altar, a silent acknowledgement. This was not about ruling. This was about surviving. Lyra noticed, and something inside her softened. The circle of bonding. Ancient runes spiraled across the chamber floor. A central stone slab lay between two carved dragon effigies. Lyra knelt and traced the sigils lightly. "I've only read about this," she whispered. Kale stood opposite her. "And now you'll perform it." She looked up. "You trust me?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." That simple word struck deeper than any confession, because trust in a kingdom built on control was rare. Lyra inhaled slowly. "Once we begin, you cannot pull away," she said. "The ritual forces honesty." She almost smiled. Not like this. Above, the gathering storm, unknown to them, the council had convened in secret. Without the elder, without the king, fear had spread among them. Some believed Kale had lost control. Others believed he had fallen under Lyra's influence. And some feared what might happen if the dragon survived. Because if Kale emerged stronger, the council would lose its leverage forever. A decision was whispered, a dangerous one. If the ritual failed, they would intervene, with force. Back below, Lyra removed her gloves, her blistered palms still raw from the broken staff. She stepped into the center circle. Kale joined her. Varenth lay just beyond them, massive head resting against the stone. His golden eye opened weakly. Lyra placed one hand against his scales. The other, she extended toward Kale. He looked at it for half a breath, then took it. The contact sent a strange current through her spine.
Warm.
Heavy. Unavoidable. She began the incantation softly. Ancient words her father had once whispered in bedtime stories, never expecting she would use them for real. The runes ignited faintly. Heat gathered. Kale felt the bond respond instantly. Fire flared beneath his skin. Lyra gasped as it surged into her as well. It was overwhelming. Not just heat. Memory. Suddenly, she saw through his eyes. A battlefield soaked in ash. Varenth soaring overhead. Kale barely 19, terrified but refusing to retreat. She felt his doubt, his fear of failing, his desperation to prove himself worthy. She staggered. He felt it too. Her childhood, her father's laughter, the night she found him bleeding in the forest, the scent of steel, the realization that wolves do not carry blades. Kale's breath hitched. He saw her grief, felt it like his own. The ritual tore away their defenses, exposed everything. Lyra nearly pulled back, but Kale tightened his grip. "Stay," he whispered. The dragon roared weakly. The black veins flared violently as the magic reacted. The binding force resisted. It pushed against Lyra's mind. Darkness. Control. Whispers that weren't hers. She nearly screamed. Kale felt it. "Fight it," he urged. She shook her head. "It's not just control." The realization struck her like lightning. It's fear. The binding magic wasn't purely external. It fed on emotional fractures, on doubt, on buried weakness. It amplified them. She saw it clearly now. The magic had rooted itself in Kale's fear of losing control, in his need to appear unbreakable. It had strengthened itself through his silence, through years of carrying everything alone. And within her, it tugged at guilt, at her father's death, at her belief that she had failed to protect him. The ritual chamber trembled. The magic resisted merging because it thrived on separation. Lyra forced herself to breathe. She looked at Kale, not through memory now, but directly. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said firmly. He felt the truth of that more than heard it. The bond between them began to stabilize. Not because they overpowered the magic, but because they stopped hiding from it. The dragon's golden eye brightened slightly. The black veins flickered. The binding magic began to split. It could not anchor itself fully, in two minds no longer fractured. Above them, the council members gathered soldiers near the ritual entrance. If the dragon awoke violently, they would strike. Inside the chamber, Lyra pressed her forehead lightly to Kale's. Not romantic, not gentle, grounded. "You are not your crown," she whispered. "And you are not your father's death," he replied quietly. The magic recoiled, as if stripped of fuel. Varintha's body shuddered. A burst of fire erupted upward, but this time it did not scorch. It spiraled, contained. The sigils blazed white. The black veins cracked like breaking glass. Lyra screamed as heat surged through her. Kale held her steady. The bond expanded. Not just king and dragon, but king, dragon, and her. For one blinding second, they were one consciousness. Fire, sky, stone, grief, courage, loyalty, and then silence. The runes dimmed. The chamber stopped trembling. Lyra collapsed forward. Kale caught her. Varinth exhaled slowly. The black veins were gone. Completely. The dragon lifted his head. Golden eye clear. Aware. Free. Kale felt it instantly. The bond had changed. It was no longer singular. It was shared. He looked at Lyra in disbelief. "You're alive." She let out a shaky laugh. "So are you." Varinth let out a low rumble. Not of pain, but recognition. He shifted slightly closer to her. Kale felt it. The dragon acknowledged her as bonded. Not subordinate. Not healer. Equal. And in that moment, something inside Kale shifted again. Not jealousy now. Something deeper. Respect. Wonder. And something dangerously close to longing. But above. Steel clashed. The chamber doors trembled violently. Ronan's voice echoed faintly from beyond. "My king, the council has mobilized troops." Lyra's breath caught. "They think it failed." Kale rose slowly, helping her up. "No," he said quietly. "They fear it succeeded." The doors began to splinter under heavy blows. Varinth rose to his full height, wings stretching wide. Stronger, steadier, free. Kale extended his hand. Lyra took it without hesitation. The bond flared between all three of them. Stable, unbreakable. And as the chamber door shattered open, the Alpha King stepped forward. The ritual chamber doors exploded inward. Splinters of ancient wood and iron scattered across the stone floor as armored soldiers flooded the entrance. Behind them stood 3 senior counselors, robes immaculate, faces pale but resolute. And between them, Captain Commander Thorn, head of the inner guard. His sword was drawn. Not lowered. Not hesitant.
Raised.
"My king," Thorn said, voice echoing against the chamber walls. "Step away from the dragon." Kale did not move. Lyra felt the bond hum between them, steady, balanced, alive. Varenth unfurled his wings fully. Not in aggression. In warning. Golden eyes clear. Uncontrolled by no one. Thorn's jaw tightened. "You are compromised," he continued. "The council has voted to secure the throne." Lyra's pulse spiked.
Secure.
Such a gentle word for betrayal. Ronan forced his way through the soldiers from behind. "You have no authority to enter this chamber," he barked. One of the counselors stepped forward. Lord Eric Veilcrest, thin and sharp-eyed. "The High Elder confessed," Eric declared loudly. "He claimed the king's judgment has been clouded for months, that he is unfit to rule." Lyra's breath hitched.
Confessed?
Kale's eyes darkened. "Under torture?" he asked quietly. Eric did not answer directly. "Under truth serum administered by the council physicians." Lyra felt anger ignite. Truth serum. Manipulated confessions. The elder had planned this. Even in arrest, he had set the stage. Kale stepped forward slowly. "And what exactly did he confess to?" Eric's voice rang cold. "That the dragon's instability began because your majesty ordered experimental magical modifications to increase its strength." A collective murmur rippled among the soldiers. Lyra stared in disbelief. "That's a lie." Thorn's gaze flicked briefly toward her. "It is what the elder swore." Kale's voice remained calm. "And you believed him?" Eric's eyes hardened. "The people are afraid. The city trembles. If the dragon rampages again..." "He won't," Lyra interrupted sharply. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward beside Kale, her voice steady despite the storm around her. "The binding magic is broken. He is free." Thorn's gaze sharpened. "Binding magic?" "Yes," she said firmly. "The elder poisoned the dragon and embedded a control circle within the infirmary. We shattered it." A flicker of doubt crossed several soldiers' faces. Eric recovered quickly. "Convenient story." Kale's voice dropped into something dangerous. "You dare question me in my own ritual chamber?" Eric held his ground. "We question what is best for Valthera." Silence crackled. Varenth let out a low, resonant growl. The bond flared between him, Kale, and Lyra. Lyra felt something clearly then. Not fear, resolve. If they hesitated now, the council would spin the narrative. Paint Kale unstable. Paint her manipulative. Paint the dragon a threat, and the people, already frightened, would believe it. Kale must not choose defensively. He must choose decisively. She stepped closer to him, softly, so only he could hear. "They're forcing the choice again." His eyes flicked toward her. "Dragon or crown?" She nodded once. "But this time don't choose between them." The realization struck him like lightning. He had been reacting, defending,
justifying.
But a king does not beg for legitimacy. He commands it. Kale stepped forward until he stood only feet from Thorn. "If you believe I corrupted my dragon," Kale said evenly, "strike me down." A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. "Do it," Kale repeated. He spread his arms slightly. Exposed. Vulnerable. "But know this," he continued, voice rising like thunder. "If you raise your blade against me unjustly, you raise it against Valthera itself." Varenth stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Not lunging. Not attacking. Simply standing behind his king. Massive. Unchained. Controlled. Lyra stepped to Kale's other side. She did not cower. She did not retreat. She faced the soldiers directly. "I stand bonded to this dragon," she declared. Murmurs erupted. Bonded? Dual bonds were legend. Kale's voice cut through the noise. The ritual succeeded. The words fell heavy. Thorn's eyes flicked between them. And if it failed, Eric pressed. Kale turned his gaze toward the counselor. You would not be standing. Silence swallowed the chamber. Lyra felt the truth of that. If Varenth were enslaved, the soldiers would already be ash. Instead, the dragon's wings slowly folded. Deliberate. Controlled. Proof. Ronan stepped forward, sword lowered but ready. The elder poisoned the dragon to destabilize the throne, he said loudly. We found the missing lance. We saw the binding circle. Several soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Thorn hesitated. He had fought beside Kale in war. He had seen the dragon protect civilians from invaders. He had never known Kale to act recklessly. Eric sensed hesitation. He raised his voice. If we allow this to stand unchecked, and the dragon loses control again. He won't, Lyra said firmly. You cannot guarantee that. Yes, she replied, meeting his eyes. I can. Because she felt it. The bond was different now. Stronger. Balanced. Not one mind dominating, but three choosing. Eric scoffed. You're a village healer. Lyra stepped forward another inch. And you are a man who hid behind incense while poisoning what you feared. A sharp intake of breath echoed. Eric's face flushed. Careful.
No, Kael interrupted.
His voice was no longer calm. It was decisive. This ends now. He turned to Thorn. Captain, you have served me loyally for 6 years. Yes, your majesty. Have you ever seen me endanger this kingdom for pride? Thorn swallowed.
No.
Have you ever seen Varenth strike without cause?
No.
Then look at him. Thorn did. The dragon's golden eyes held steady. Aware. Not clouded. Not feral. Controlled power. Thorn slowly lowered his sword. A few soldiers followed. Eric's composure cracked. You're making a mistake. Kale's gaze snapped to him.
No.
His voice echoed across stone and steel. You did. Kale stepped forward fully now, not as a man defending himself, but as king. The High Elder conspired against the throne. He used forbidden magic. He manipulated fear. He endangered every life in the city. His voice rose. And you, he pointed at Eric, enabled him. Eric stepped back instinctively. This is tyranny. This is justice. The chamber trembled, not from magic, but from shifting power. Kale raised his voice, so all could hear. Valthera does not kneel to fear. We do not murder what protects us because we tremble at rumor. He extended his hand toward Varenth. The dragon lowered his massive head beside him. A unified symbol. Today, I choose neither dragon nor crown, Kale declared. I choose the truth. Silence filled the chamber. Then, Ronan dropped to one knee. For the king. One by one. Soldiers followed. Thorn knelt. Even some council guards lowered their heads. Eric stood alone, breathing hard. Cornered. You cannot silence the council, he whispered. Kale's voice was steady. I don't need to. He turned to the soldiers. Arrest Lord Veilcrest and any council member complicit in the binding ritual. Investigate every record. Every vault. Eric's face drained. You'll fracture the realm. Kale stepped closer. It was already fractured. Guards seized Eric. He did not resist. But as he was dragged away, he looked at Lyra. You think you saved him, he said coldly. You only made him more dangerous. Lyra did not flinch. No, she replied quietly. I made him stronger. The chamber doors closed behind the arrested counselors. Silence settled once more. Heavy. But no longer suffocating. Kale turned to Lyra. The weight of everything pressed between them. You stood against the council, he said softly. You stood against them first. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat of the bond humming between them. The dragon shifted gently behind them. At peace. For the first time since the execution bell rang, Kale studied her face carefully. You changed everything, he said quietly. Lyra exhaled slowly. So did you. And for a heartbeat, the crown no longer felt like a burden. It felt like something chosen, not forced. But the final test remained. Not political. Not magical. Personal. Because the kingdom had seen her, heard her, felt the shift. And whispers would begin. Who is she? What is she to the king? Why does the dragon bow to her too? The choice before Kale now was no longer about survival.
It was about legacy.
And love. The city did not sleep that night. Torches burned along every balcony of Valthera. Rumors ran like wildfire. But for the first time in days, the smoke carried relief instead of panic. The dragon lived. The king stood. The council fractured. And fear had not won. The morning after fire. At dawn, Kale stood alone on the eastern balcony of the palace. The same balcony where the execution bell had tolled. The same stone that had nearly witnessed betrayal sealed in blood. Below, the people gathered again. Not in silence this time. In anticipation. Varent stood behind him, wings folded, posture proud, golden eyes clear. No black veins, only strength. Lyra remained a step behind Kale, dressed no longer in ash-streaked travel clothes, but in simple royal attire offered by the palace seamstresses. She had refused jewels, refused silk, refused anything that did not feel like herself. But she could not refuse what had happened. The bond shimmered quietly between the three of them. Balanced. Unshaken. Kale turned to her. They expect a statement. They deserve one, she replied gently. He studied her for a moment. You could leave now, he said quietly. Return to Ember Hollow. No one would blame you. Lyra's lips curved slightly. And pretend this didn't happen? His voice softened. It would be easier. She looked out over the city. Smoke still curled faintly from distant rooftops.
People rebuilding.
Children peeking from behind stone columns to stare at the dragon. My father used to say, she murmured, that dragons aren't meant to belong to kings. Kale raised a brow slightly. And what are they meant for? She turned to him fully. To remind rulers they are not gods. Silence lingered. Then Kale did something no king in Valthera had done in generations.
He removed his crown
and held it in his hands. The crowd below quieted immediately. My people, he called, voice carrying across the square. The past week has tested us. He did not hide, did not soften. A dragon burned our fields. Fear gripped our homes. And I was forced to choose. The crowd shifted uneasily. Kale continued. I chose to listen. Murmurs rippled. I chose to question fear. I chose to trust truth over pressure. He extended a hand toward Lyra. And because one voice dared to speak when others demanded silence, Valthera still stands. The people followed his gesture. Whispers spread. Kale's voice grew stronger. The High Elder and those who conspired against this realm will face judgment under law, not secrecy. Cheers began cautiously. Varenth was not mad. He was attacked, manipulated, used as a pawn. The dragon lifted his head slightly, as if understanding. But we are not pawns, Kale said firmly. We are not ruled by fear. The cheers grew louder now, stronger. Kale turned slightly toward Lyra again. And from this day forward, the bond of Valthera will no longer rest on one soul alone. A hush fell. Lyra's heart skipped. He placed the crown back upon his head, not as burden, but with calm purpose. Then he did something that sent a wave through the kingdom. He reached for Lyra's hand and held it openly before the realm. She stood between fire and blade, he declared. She healed what others tried to destroy. She carries courage not for power, but for truth. The crowd watched in breathless silence. Kale's voice softened, but carried. And I will not pretend her place here is temporary. Lyra's pulse pounded. He turned to face her fully now. Not as king addressing subject, but as man addressing woman. In one moment, he said quietly enough for only those near to hear, you changed everything. Her throat tightened. You changed it too. He stepped closer. I was ready to sacrifice what mattered most because I feared losing control. She shook her head gently. You feared losing your people. And nearly lost myself. Silence settled between them. Not heavy. Honest. The dragon let out a low rumble behind them.
Warm.
Approving. Kale exhaled slowly. I do not wish to rule beside someone who stands behind me. Lyra's breath caught. I wish to rule beside someone who stands with me. The words hung in the air like fate choosing its path. The crowd sensed it. The moment.
The shift.
Not forced. Not political.
Real.
Lyra searched his face carefully. You're not offering this because you feel indebted.
No.
Or because the people expect it.
No.
Then why? Kale's answer was simple. Because when I nearly lost everything, you chose me. The wind moved gently across the balcony. The city waited, and Lyra felt something inside her settle. Not fear, not doubt,
But certainty.
she had spent her life watching power silence truth, watching fear justify cruelty. But here,
Now.
a king had chosen differently. She stepped closer. I will not be your shadow, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. I wouldn't want you to be. And I will speak when I disagree. I expect you to. And if ever you choose fear over truth again, remind me. Silence stretched. And then, Lyra Vale nodded once. I stand with you. The cheers that erupted below shook the very stone of the palace. Not because a wedding had been declared, not because a crown changed hands, but because the kingdom had witnessed something rare. Power choosing partnership. Varenth spread his wings wide, not in dominance, but in unity. The bond between the three of them flared softly, balanced.
Whole.
Weeks later, the council was restructured. Transparency enforced. Dragon lore no longer banned but studied. The royal armory secured with shared oversight. And in the fields once burned, green shoots began to rise again. Lyra walked those fields one evening, hands brushing new growth. Kale joined her without ceremony.
No guards.
Just two people walking where fire once devoured life. Do you regret it? He asked softly. She glanced at him. Standing in front of a dragon?
He nodded faintly.
She smiled.
No.
She looked toward the horizon where Varenth circled peacefully overhead. Do you regret not striking the blade? Kale watched the dragon's shadow pass across the land.
No.
Silence fell between them, gentle and unthreatening. She turned to him thoughtfully. Tell me something honestly. He raised a brow. If I hadn't stepped forward that day, would you have chosen the crown? He didn't answer immediately. The truth mattered. I would have chosen duty, he said finally, and lost something far greater. Her chest warmed at that. He stepped closer. You didn't just save my dragon, he added quietly. You saved me from becoming a king ruled by fear. Lyra's voice softened. You were never meant to rule alone. He reached for her hand again, this time not as declaration, but as habit, comfort, home. And in the distance, the execution bell that once tolled for death was dismantled, melted down, reforged into a new emblem above the palace gates. Not a blade, not a chain, but a dragon in flight. Reflection. When fear demands sacrifice, do you give up what is loyal to protect what is powerful? Or do you risk everything for what is true? Tell me in the comments. If you were forced to choose between security and trust, what would you choose? Because sometimes, the moment that changes everything is the one where you refuse to choose at all.